Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. Good to see you see you here today. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes while we let a few more people join. While we're waiting, open up the chat window and make sure you've got it open here. So if you have any questions as we're going through the presentation, you can shoot them in the chat and I'll make sure to get them answered. So I'm located here in central Canada. It's nice and sunny here today. I'm just outside of Winnipeg. So I'm in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. If you're not from Canada, that's about halfway between Vancouver and Toronto, right in the center, the coldest part of Winnipeg. If you're from the US, then that's about 8 hours north of Minneapolis. So yeah, we're right in the depths of winter here, although it hasn't been a terribly cold winter. We've got a bit of snow in the last little bit. So a few more weeks of winter. We're looking forward to our summer. Our summers are pretty short here, so we certainly enjoy them. Okay, let me start to share my screen just so that we're ready to go here in a minute. While we're waiting, shoot in the chat where you're from, where you're calling in from, and maybe the types of projects you're working on. Hopefully you should be able to see my screen there. So it looks like we're almost ready to go here in just another minute. All right, right at the top of the hour, we like commissioning that's on time, so we're going to start here right on time. So thanks for joining. Today's presentation is on systems and processes to standardize commissioning using top-rated commissioning software and the industry best workflows and templates to manage commissioning. So you're about to get the #1 framework to standardize your commissioning and give your commissioning at the end of projects the best chance of success with these best practices for managing commissioning. Now, this presentation is meant to be interactive, so like I'm seeing in the chat there, definitely have the chat window open. Shoot any questions you have in the chat as we're going through. I'll make sure I get your questions answered as we go through the presentation here. I'll also have a time for Q&A at the end of this presentation, so feel free to ask questions during the presentation or hold on to them to the end at the Q&A. The presentation we'll target is about an hour. We'll try and keep it within the hour. If there's lots of good questions, maybe we'll go past a little bit. But if you've only got the hour here for the presentation, then we'll make sure you get all the information within that hour, and hopefully we can help you with commissioning. Now, I've used the commissioning project management frameworks that we're going to discuss today on several projects. I've used these commissioning project management frameworks in the power industry, building hydroelectric generation projects in northern Manitoba here, working on HVDC projects within the province as the commissioning manager there. I've used these same frameworks in the aerospace industry, building satellites and rockets for the Canadian Space Agency. I've used these commissioning project management frameworks as well in the water treatment industry, where we've been expanding and upgrading a wastewater treatment plant facility not too far away from here. I'm also on the organizing committee for the Commissioning Professionals Society, where we host an annual event and have some of the best and brightest minds of the commissioning world all come together to discuss some of the challenges we're facing in the industry and how to elevate the importance of commissioning on projects. So this is good information, and it'll definitely help you on projects. And I'm not the only one that's getting results with this approach to commissioning as well. We've helped several other people in projects standardize their commissioning workflows on projects as well, like Sheldon or Jonald or Kale and many others. And they all tell me after working with us that this was an eye-opener. They had no idea of everything that was required for commissioning. They tell me that this was the first commissioning system they've found that fully matches with what really happens on site during projects. And after working with us, they tell me that they knew they needed to upgrade their commissioning workflows to something better for a few years now, but they just haven't been able to get it done, and they appreciated our help to kind of guide them through the process. So you can also go to our website, go to commissioningandstartup.com. At the top there, there's a link to success stories, and you can see what everybody's saying from the products and services that we offer and how we've helped them on their projects. So Everyone's saying these systems and processes are great stuff. They're helping a lot of people complete commissioning on projects, and they can definitely help you on your projects as well. So just to be clear, though, this is not technical commissioning. If you're here looking how to do an electrical high pot test, if you're looking for ASHRAE or NEBB building commissioning, HVAC test and balance, or if you're looking for specific flushing standards for food grade piping, you're not going to find any of that here. That's not what this presentation is about. But technical commissioning is not actually what's missing on projects, though, is it? There's a lot of smart people working on projects, and they'll get the testing completed one way or the other. What's missing on projects is the structure that's supposed to go around the technical commissioning. What's missing are the systems and processes to standardize your commissioning and allow you to manage commissioning in the best possible way. What's missing is the ability with systems and processes to complete commissioning as efficiently as possible. So let's look at a simple org chart. There's obviously three main functions on a project, right? We need to get it designed, we need to get it installed during construction, and we need to get everything tested during commissioning. Or if you've got an EPC contract and your design and construction are part of the same group, this still all applies as well. There's typically someone to manage the design, and they're following design best practices to coordinate all the disciplines of design. And there's always someone to manage construction. There's an entire industry dedicated to construction project management. But where are the systems and processes for commissioning? On a lot of projects, they don't even exist, or they only exist as spreadsheets. And commissioning is unorganized and a scramble to complete at the end. When the last part of your projects, the most complex part, when everything has to start working together during commissioning, has no standardized systems or processes to finish projects, commissioning can be a nightmare to complete at the end. So there's definitely a gap in the industry, and the last 20% of projects is often a mess. And it's no wonder that projects are late and over budget when commissioning teams have no standardized systems and processes for commissioning. And spreadsheets don't count. That's not really a system to standardize your commissioning, although that's what a lot of projects do, right? There is a gap in the industry, and this is the gap that we help you fill by implementing systems and processes for you to standardize your commissioning so you can complete commissioning as efficiently as possible. So this presentation is for project managers that want an organized approach to finishing capital projects during commissioning, for project teams that need systems and processes to standardize commissioning so they can complete commissioning as efficiently as possible, and for companies that want to save time and money during capital project commissioning by standardizing their commissioning processes. Without systems and processes to standardize commissioning, when commissioning is left to the end or when paper and spreadsheets are used for tracking, project teams are just gambling. There's no way to control the end of your project during commissioning. It's the Wild West, and all you can do is roll the dice and hope for the best at the end. It's a complete crapshoot. So let's get that fixed for you with systems and processes to standardize your commissioning so you can complete commissioning as efficiently as possible. We help project teams determine the top-rated commissioning software to use, the industry best commissioning processes to follow, so you can complete commissioning as efficiently as possible to save time and money on your projects. And at the end of this presentation, if you'd like some more help to get standardized systems and processes for your commissioning, I'll show you how with the services that we offer so that you can save time and money during commissioning on your projects too. So if this all sounds interesting, then I'm glad you're here. So first, I want to share some statistics with you that are quite concerning. This is Professor Bent Flivberg. He's from the University of Oxford, and what he's done is compiled a database of over 16,000 projects over the last several decades. And he's also written a book called How Big Things Get Done. If you haven't read it, it's a great book. You should check it out. What Professor Flivberg's research shows is that only 8.5% of projects are on time and on budget. That means over 90% of projects are late and over budget. That's terrible. The construction industry definitely has a terrible track record of completing projects. The complexity of completing projects during commissioning is one of the main contributing factors to delays when there are no systems or processes for commissioning. A lot of projects ignore commissioning until it's too late, right? They're missing important aspects in contracts, or they're still using paper and spreadsheets for commissioning, but these outdated methods just no longer work to complete today's complex projects. So today I'm going to show you how to structure your commissioning for success so you can beat these odds and have your project succeed with commissioning. Let me know in the chat, what's been your experience with commissioning on projects? Do these statistics make sense? Have your projects been going well and being completed on time and on budget, or are you still stuck using spreadsheets to manage your commissioning? Has commissioning been a scramble at the end of your projects? Let me know what your experience has been on projects. If Professor Flivberg's research is making sense to you, if you're familiar with what you've seen on projects here, or if you've maybe had some success and your commissioning has gone well, let me know your experience with that as well. Now, to be clear, there certainly are lots of challenges in the construction industry, right? And a good book to read is called Built to Fail by Todd Zabel. It's a new book. It was released earlier this year in January. And what Mr. Zabel talks about is all the things that are currently wrong with the approach to design and construction on capital projects. And he also talks about what to do to fix it. And with these challenges that exist in all phases of projects that all projects are having to deal with, it means you need to have a robust system for commissioning to be ready to face these challenges and ensure you can successfully complete your projects. We're determined to get you fully prepared for commissioning with the best tools and processes required to get the job done efficiently, and so you're ready to face any challenge that comes your way from earlier stages of the projects. So Lloyd says he's got a project over a year late. Yep, I feel your pain. Another project I'm supporting is between 2 and 3 years late, and you can just know the additional costs that are associated with that, right? When project teams have to stick around that late, and it's all because of poor planning for commissioning. Contractors just don't want to get ready, don't support quality programs, don't want to structure a proper commissioning program, and that's how things can end up very bad at the end of projects when you don't get this stuff right, right? So when I give this presentation, the first thing a lot of people want to know is just tell me what to do. Just give me the checklists to use, or just tell me the steps to follow. Or I've heard about software. Just tell me the software to use, and that'll tell me what I need for commissioning, and I'll be all good, right? Or just tell me how to commission an LNG plant. Where's the 6-page document that shows me the steps how to commission an LNG plant, for example? And when I hear these questions, I already know these projects are in trouble because there's a little bit more to it than that. You're never going to find a single document that shows you the steps for commissioning, and you're not going to find that magic software that tells you how to commission your project, because each project is different, right? And you need specific systems and processes applied to your unique commissioning circumstances. So first, let's address the problems of what not to do for commissioning before we talk about the systems and processes that are required for successful commissioning. We know that projects are having problems. We know this because the data shows us this, that 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget. Projects are losing time during commissioning, and they're missing their in-service dates like a year or more, like Lloyd says on his project, right? And projects can end up being a nightmare at the end during commissioning that can go on an extra year, 2, 3 of trying to get through all this stuff when commissioning is not properly planned and executed. But why is this? Why are projects struggling with commissioning? We need to address these problems before I teach you what to do for commissioning. There's 2 common mistakes that are made on projects, and just by fixing these 2 mistakes, projects can see huge improvements at the end during commissioning. So what are these 2 mistakes? The first mistake is leaving commissioning to the end of projects. We've been told for many decades that commissioning takes place at the end of projects, right? You need to finish construction, and then you're going to test everything at the end. But this is actually not true. This is, of course, what most projects do, and they cross their fingers and roll the dice at the end. And maybe you've had this experience on projects. Lloyd is having this experience on projects. But this is what leads to problems on projects. In fact, to be successful, the commissioning process starts right at the beginning during your FEED and during your procurement processes. And you must make sure that systems and processes for commissioning are established early in your projects if you want your on-site testing to go smoothly at the end. When commissioning is left to the end, there's just no way to be proactive. All the problems are left to the end of your project, and there's no time to recover. There, you're missing that systems-based approach to completing projects, and the damage is done before on-site testing even starts. It's exactly like Stephen Covey says in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. His habit number 2 says, begin with the end in mind. And you must be doing this on capital projects by having commissioning systems and processes right from the start. You must have a clear vision of your project objectives right from the start of your project, which means you must have visibility and clarity on how to complete your project during commissioning, which is defined by the systems and processes that you establish on your projects. Think about it this way. You want your projects to be successfully completed, so you need to define what that success looks like during commissioning right at the beginning of your project. The way to do this is by planning projects from right to left instead of from left to right like most projects do, which means you need systems and processes for commissioning early in projects so that your project team can focus on what success looks like during commissioning at the end of your project. There's just no way to successfully complete projects unless you start with the end in mind. It's like that for everything. Projects are no different. You wouldn't go out to sea and captain a ship without a rudder or a compass, would you? Of course not. So why would you do that on your projects? And this is why it's critical to implement standardized commissioning systems and processes early in projects so that objectives are clearly defined for everyone to see and understand how their role contributes to successful commissioning and startup so that all project groups are aligned and working towards the same goal on projects. So mistake number 2 is many projects are still using paper and spreadsheets to manage commissioning. They're still using manual methods to track everything that's required for commissioning. And in today's information age, that doesn't really make sense, right? If you're still using paper and spreadsheets to track completion of complex projects with just so many things to keep track of. While paper and spreadsheets used to work 20 or 30 years ago, projects are just far too complex now. There's just too many documents and too much information, and it's impossible to keep track of everything manually in Excel. We need access to real-time data to make informed decisions. We can't wait until Friday's spreadsheet update to see the status of where everything's at. We need access to information right now so we can make informed decisions. If we're expecting something on a Tuesday morning to be done by 3 o'clock that afternoon, we need to know if that actually took place. We're not going to wait until Friday spreadsheet update to figure out what was done on Tuesday. Projects move too fast. Successful project teams are no longer using paper and spreadsheets, and I'll show you what they're using. When projects use paper and spreadsheets, there's just no way to show everyone what success looks like during commissioning. It's an inefficient way to get the job done. Things get missed and cause delays during commissioning, and your spreadsheets will just never give clarity to design and construction groups on what commissioning is all about. And when everyone has a different idea on how to finish projects during commissioning, it's super difficult to complete projects when everyone is going in different directions and everyone has a different idea of what's required for commissioning. With no clear view of commissioning, project teams spend more time talking about commissioning rather than actually doing commissioning. And we don't need more meetings. We need a better way to organize our teams so we can get projects completed more efficiently. When projects make one or more of these 2 common mistakes, when they leave commissioning to the end, or if they're still using paper and spreadsheets to manage commissioning, we call this cowboy commissioning. When projects suffer from cowboy commissioning, the work is inefficient, you miss your deadlines, everything is a last-minute scramble, and commissioning takes a lot longer than it should with many costly delays. So any questions so far? Let's just pause for a moment. Is this making sense? What's been your experience on projects with regards to cowboy commissioning? Has the approach been paper and spreadsheets and scramble at the end with cowboy commissioning, or have things gone better on your projects with structured systems and processes to meet your project's in-service date? Let me know what your experience has been on projects with regards to completions and commissioning, using software, not using software, and whether or not you're still stuck with a cowboy approach to commissioning. Excel still seems to be the trend, yeah, and it's hurting projects so badly. so badly that projects maybe don't even know how badly it's hurting them and how inefficient it is to try and do all that manually tracking. And it's a shame because there's such better systems and processes um, to manage projects. I'll show you some of the details of how Excel struggles and some of the things that are missed in some of the later slides here. All right, let's start with the processes required for commissioning. And after this, then we'll review the software systems and how this all gets modeled in our commissioning software systems. So there's three frameworks that are required for commissioning project management. There is our planning frameworks that are required for commissioning, our construction completion frameworks, and our on-site commissioning and startup frameworks. And these are what makes up the integrated completions process. When you establish integrated completion processes earlier in your projects, everyone starts with the end in mind with a crystal clear picture of what success looks like during commissioning. You reduce the risk of completing projects. You're able to complete commissioning much more efficiently, which ultimately saves your projects millions of dollars and months of schedule. Most importantly, you're able to deliver high quality systems that can be used for decades of reliable operation. Mary says, yeah, we use Excel to track production. Okay, I'll get into some more details here in a few slides that can hopefully help you get that upgraded. We do start our planning during the feed stage, but we are lacking a good completion software still with Excel. Perfect, Eric. I've got some good solutions for you that I'll show you here in a bit. So when you don't have standardized processes, it may seem like you're making progress until on-site testing starts, right? And then nothing works and things are missing and there's constant delays. You're losing time during commissioning. It's a scrambling to get things finished at the end. You're faced with costly delays and you very quickly fall into the trap of cowboy commissioning, which takes much longer to complete. Without standardized commissioning processes on projects, well, what most project teams do, like we're seeing in the chats, they've got their all singing, all dancing Excel macros that are attempting to manage commissioning. A lot of times, design and construction is the focus on, and commissioning gets kind of forgotten about, right? And you dump everything on the commissioning guys at the end of the project, hoping they'll figure it out. But all this does is defer all your risk to the end of projects. And this is, of course, what happens on most projects. We're seeing that in the chat, right? Is fingers crossed and hoping things will work in the end and that the commissioning guys will figure it out. But it just results in the blame game, finger pointing, the commissioning guys showing up and they're frustrated because things are missing and your claims start to pile up. And I guess the plan is to fight it out in court, but this is hardly a good approach to finishing projects, even though this is what most projects do. There is a better way when you start your projects with the end in mind by implementing integrated completion processes to standardize your commissioning on projects. So I'm going to go through what's on the screen here, but first, why is it called the integrated completions process? Well, that's because commissioning is integrated into all early stages of projects. So during procurement, there's critical aspects that need to go into our engineering contracts, our construction contracts, our equipment procurement contracts to make sure that the rules of the game of the project are established properly in contracts. When contracts are only used as a tool to get the job started and not as a tool to finish the job, then they're not being used effectively to define how we're going to finish the project. Commissioning needs to be integrated into our design processes. I'll show you how that works to make sure that the front end of projects aligns with the back end of projects. We need to have commissioning integrated into construction processes with regards to construction quality management to make sure that we're getting items in the right sequence that we need for commissioning, and particularly during our construction completions processes to align this complex interface between construction and commissioning and make sure that transition goes smoothly. This is the only way that projects are successful is when you standardize your commissioning processes early in projects to give your projects a strong finish during commissioning. So let's go through each framework in the process that's required to set up commissioning processes correctly and ultimately get modeled in your commissioning software. I will go through what's on the screen fairly quickly here because it can get pretty in-depth, but what I'll do is I'll send you the details of this that you can review after this presentation. You can take your time to read it and make sure that you get all the details here. But by all means, if you have a question, as I go through it, shoot it in the chat and we'll make sure that we get it answered here. All right. So the first item we briefly touched on is contracts. When we're going through our planning frameworks for commissioning our engineering contracts, particularly our construction contracts, that interface in how to transition from bulk construction to systems-based commissioning is a complex process. I'll probably say it's the most complex thing you'll do on your project is make that transition from construction to commissioning. And we need that defined in contracts and how that's going to work. When that's missing, and in often cases it is, we look at contracts and they're pretty light on commissioning details. There might be a few lines, or maybe there's a lot of items in there on the technical commissioning, but usually contracts are missing all of the commercial requirements, on all the project management requirements that define how the project is going to be completed, and it's left to figure out later, right? And it's just a scramble to figure out when your contracts don't define how that's going to work right at the beginning. Even our equipment procurement contracts, when there's critical offsite testing that needs to take place to align with how we're going to test things on site, that all needs to be properly defined in the factory. I'm sure you've been part of those discussions where it wasn't properly defined in equipment procurement contracts, and the discussion is, well, should we pay extra to test it in the factory, or should we defer that to site? The discussion 99 times out of 100 is, we're not going to pay for that. We're going to test that on site. We'll test it there. Well, you've deferred all your risk to later in the project, and that never goes well. One of those will burn you, where there's a problem and equipment does have to go back to the factory because it wasn't properly tested in the factory in the first place. So contracts need to set that up properly so that you don't get burned. The second item here is our feed processes. I'm sure you've been part of lessons learned on a project, but a lot of projects are not that great at incorporating lessons learned on projects. Lessons learned quickly get documented and filed away and forgotten about and never really get applied properly on the next project. Well, during our feed processes is when that needs to take place. So all the lessons learned that were learned during commissioning, during operation, all that feedback needs to go back into our feed processes during preliminary design reviews, during detailed design reviews, to make sure that what design groups are producing actually aligns with what's needed later in the project during commissioning and during operations. And there may be some even more detailed design reviews required for some complex systems like our control and protection systems, or our process control narratives and how those are defined, reviewing a lot of our HMI screens to make sure that the user interface is actually what's needed during commissioning and during operations. This is the process to do that during feed, to have commissioning and operational input to our feed processes. The next item is factory acceptance testing and integrated factory acceptance testing. So I'm sure you're very familiar with a lot of the standard equipment that we've been doing factory acceptance testing for decades. Testing a pump is pretty basic in the factory. Run it for a few hours, test 3 points on the pump curve, make sure everything meets specifications, all good. But when it comes to more complex systems, such as control cabinets, these need to be thoroughly tested, both the hardware and the software in the factory, to verify these systems in an integrated manner. A lot of times only the hardware is tested, but these complex systems, software is just so fundamentally critical in how they function that we need to be testing both the hardware and the software in the factory to make sure that when these complex devices arrive at site, they actually work. A lot of projects don't do this. They're deferring that integration or even development of the software on site, but that's not commissioning. If you're doing design, if you're trying to make software work in the cabinet, that should have occurred much earlier in your project. If you're going through all that on site for the first time, then you're not focusing on commissioning. You're developing software and trying to make it work with these complex systems, which always adds significant delays on projects. We see this so many times that the controls are a mess at the end of projects because it didn't follow a proper sequence much earlier in the project. So integrated factory acceptance testing is critically important on projects for those more complex systems. The next item is our project systematization, and this is one of the main reasons as well to get commissioning groups involved early in projects, because we need to be taking a systems-based approach through all phases of projects. And how the project is systematized is determined by how the commissioning team wants to start up the project. You've heard of your WBS. That's kind of a front-end approach in how design groups want to design these systems, but that doesn't necessarily align with your project systematization and how you want to start up the systems. So having that that systems-based approach through all phases of projects align identically with your startup sequence is the only way to ensure that everything comes together and aligns at the end of your projects. And that's why we need to have our project systematized during our feed processes once designs are far enough along to get equipment tag lists in place so that we can have that systems-based approach through design, through construction, through commissioning to align identically with our project startup sequence. And of course, that's going to have to be defined in contracts if we want construction groups to be sequencing in that manner to align with what's required for commissioning, but it's the only way to have everything come together here successfully at the end. So the next item is our gated commissioning workflows. How we're going to go through the various stages of construction completions, pre-commissioning, commissioning, startup. That all needs to be defined along with the gated milestones to be monitored through each of those workflows. That only needs to be defined in advance in how we're going to complete the project so that everybody is aware of the goalposts that they need to achieve for each of these gated commissioning workflows. So as we're coming through our planning, we'll have enough of a picture here developing our plans and processes for commissioning that will start integrating this into our commissioning software. And this is critical to define in advance so that we have software systems ready to go prior to on-site commissioning starting. So all of our gated commissioning workflows, they're all modeled within the software. All of the forms and certificates we're going to use to sign off, all of our tag lists, how they're systematized, everything to model our commissioning process is in our commissioning software systems. And when you get the right system in place, it's quite powerful in how you can model and define the completion of your project so that not everyone needs to be an expert in commissioning, because we're never going to have everyone fully understanding what's required for commissioning. But when this is all modeled properly in software, everybody has that visibility into what's required for commissioning without needing to be that expert in commissioning. So it's a huge communication tool to help people complete projects. So as we're further getting through our planning processes here, we'll be able to develop our commissioning sequence and apply dates and schedules within that to have our sequence and schedule that's required for commissioning. This as well all gets loaded into our commissioning software to give our plan that when component of when some of these items need to be completed and when these milestones need to be achieved within our gated commissioning workflows. So sequence and schedule gives everybody that picture well in advance of what's required. So you'd be familiar with forms and certificates with commissioning. We've been using those for decades. But when I say forms and certificates, I don't mean the paper form or the certificate that's signed. That's kind of the old way of doing it if you're still kind of stuck with spreadsheets. But the forms and certificates are now all digital within our commissioning software, where the forms are sign-offs that are used within the software to sign off each of our gated commissioning milestones within our gated commissioning workflows. So what forms are going to be used? How are they signed off to transition through each of our gated commissioning workflows? And maybe most importantly, who has authority to sign off on each of these as we transition through these gated workflows so that nothing gets missed? Same with checklists and procedures. You're, I'm sure, very familiar with checklists and procedures. We've been using those for decades. But now these are all modeled within our commissioning software. So checklists, there's no longer any need to have writing that you can't read on a paper checklist in the field. This is all digitally tracked and loaded within our software, where the commissioning experts in the field have devices right out there and they're entering information right into the software to be able to complete checklists. So we have instant notification, what's being completed, which punch items are still outstanding. Everything's tracked and nothing gets missed. And then the last item, not because it's the least important, but we need to be planning our commissioning safety processes as well. So we need to be establishing our PSSR processes well in advance of commissioning. We need to be closely working with our HSE teams to make sure that we've got hazard response teams in place, because the commissioning team is relied upon heavily from a safety standpoint to make sure that these startups take place safely. And the commissioning team has the equipment experts and the experience, having gone through a lot of these startups before, to provide guidance and expertise to make sure that these startups all take place safely. So we need to make sure we have a robust safety plan built into our commissioning software as well to make sure that everything takes place safely. So then the next section here is our construction completions, and there's two frameworks that are required here. I'm sure you've been involved in punch list walkdowns in the past, but now this is the formalized process to load and track these within our commissioning software. So how are punch list walkdowns being completed? How are punch items being identified, and how are they being categorized? How are they being loaded into software? How are they being assigned to individuals to complete? And how is everything tracked so that nothing gets missed? The software is extremely powerful when it comes to punch list completion, and we need to be leveraging the tools to track all those items. Tracking things in Excel just is a nightmare. I've been on projects where we have so many lists of things that are tracked on spreadsheets that we need a list to keep track of the number of lists that we have, and it's just brutal. So we need to be using our software systems and leveraging these powerful tools to keep track of all the big details, all the small details, to make sure that nothing gets missed on projects. And then the next framework in our construction completions is our subsystem static completion. On projects, the question always is how do we transition from bulk construction to systems-based commissioning? Well, this is how you do that, is by clearly systematizing your project and by clearly defining static completion for each subsystem and system, and then by modeling and using this in software to keep track of each subsystem completion. It's a different mindset that transitions from construction and equipment-based installation to systems-based commissioning, and that mindset transition can be challenging to have people think about, or transition from focusing on just the pump to thinking about the system of items, to know that we need all of this group of equipment on just 90% of it. If we're missing the level transmitter, then the system isn't going to work. So this mindset transition from construction to commissioning, software definitely helps us with that, to show everybody all the big details, all the small details of exactly what's required to make this transition, all the physical assets, all the documentation that's required, so that everyone has a crystal clear view of what each of these static completions is for each subsystem and each system, so that nothing gets missed. If you're doing this any other way, if you're trying to do this on spreadsheets, you're just asking for trouble, because spreadsheets just cannot model this transition from construction to commissioning in any way. And it typically doesn't go well. So then the last item here is our on-site commissioning and startup frameworks, and there's 6 frameworks that are required here. So you'd be familiar with pre-commissioning, commissioning, and startup. These items that we've been doing for decades. Often people ask me, well, what takes place during pre-commissioning and what takes place during commissioning? And ultimately, it doesn't really matter as long as nothing gets missed. And we're going to model this all in software anyways, but you can think of pre-commissioning as testing at the equipment level, just testing the pump by itself. Commissioning then moves into testing the group of equipment. We need the pump and the pipes and the valves and the pressure sensor and everything to work together as a subsystem. That would be stages of commissioning, but that all gets modeled in software. So we don't need to get too hung up on, well, this is pre-commissioning or this is commissioning, because the workflows are all shown in software and what takes place when. So then moving into startup, introducing our process fluids for the first time, or first energizations in the case of an electrical system where we're energizing main circuit elements at 230 kilovolts or whatever that could be. Performance verification, now that we've got systems started up, for any fine tuning that's required or optimize operation of the system to get ready for our trial operation. Contracts often require a 3-day operating period or a 30-day. I've seen 90 days in some cases, where the system needs to operate uninterrupted for that period of time to prove reliable operation before we get to the last step here, which is handover, where we can place the systems into commercial service and start getting value from the assets that we've been working on for many years. So you can see there's quite a bit involved for commissioning to be successful, and spreadsheets just can't do this. If you're still using spreadsheets, or if your IT department has forced you to use some crappy software that doesn't really work anyways, what that means is one of two things. It means either that you don't have any standardized processes and you're doing a lot of this by brute force, or it means you're not doing some or all of this at all, right? And neither situation is good. It's not good for you and your project team, because you're burning out a lot of good people with this brute force approach, and you're driving them away from the industry. And it's not good for your projects because you're leaving all the risk to the end of your project during commissioning. And we know how that turns out. The data tells us that 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget with that approach to projects. Okay, so let's look at the software systems to use. And I will send you a copy of this list that's on the screen after this presentation so you can review it more closely. When you get the right software system for commissioning, you get rid of all that brute force that's required to manually track in spreadsheets. All your checklists and all your punch lists, they're all completed in software, and your workflows, they're all digitized in software. So everybody knows exactly what's required and when it's required. You're able to keep track of everything and nothing gets missed. Even the small little details. If you need a setting in a VFD, that's important during commissioning. It's not important during design. It's not important during commission or during construction, but that small little setting, it's important during commissioning. It's not right. Your motor's going to keep tripping off. Every small little detail is important, and we need to be tracking everything in some sort of robust system so that we have what we need for commissioning. When you get these systems in place, then what that really gives is everyone clarity on what success looks like during commissioning, right? We can't expect all groups on projects to know that we need that VFD setting at this point in time in the project to make it successful, right? Well, when everything's tracked and every little detail is identified, then everybody knows what's required, right? You need to have your protection coordination study ready for this time because we need to have these coordinated protection settings at this point in commissioning to proceed. When you have these systems in place, then you're able to standardize your commissioning processes to complete commissioning as efficiently as possible and prevent costly delays on projects. That VFD setting, right? It's a small little item, but if you need to go track it down and you lose a day doing that, then that's a costly mistake, right? Just for the tiniest little item. So when commissioning software is not implemented correctly, or if you're using the wrong system on your project, or worse, you're still using paper and spreadsheets, then you have no standardized processes to complete projects during commissioning. Everything is random on projects, and there's no consistent way to complete your commissioning. And when you have no consistent way to complete commissioning, what that really means is that you have no consistent way to complete capital projects. And that's pretty scary, isn't it? That people are allowed to start projects without having a robust method to also finish them. Without a method to finish projects, you require a lot of brute force to get to the end during commissioning, which doesn't turn out well for 9 out of 10 projects. So what do project teams do without a system to complete projects? Well, like we've seen in the chat, they've got their all singing, all dancing Excel macros that they've perfected over the years. And they have a few people that are manually updating these spreadsheets each day. And it might appear that you're tracking commissioning, but everyone's still confused about what's really required for commissioning, and things get missed and nothing works. And commissioning is delayed, which is very expensive at the end of projects when you don't have a streamlined process to complete projects. The list on the screen shows the 25 plus different commissioning software platforms that are available. Now, we don't sell software. We never have, and we don't intend to. We've reviewed a lot of these, most of them on this list, and we know which ones to use for each industry. We can show you the most appropriate software system to use for your projects. A lot of these systems, well, all of the good systems, they're all cloud-based systems. Something I do often hear is that, well, your IT department just isn't going to allow it, right? It needs to be part of their network. Now, when you get the right system, all of these systems, the good and the best systems, they're built on the most secure server networks in the world. And I do assure you that the big companies like Amazon and Google that have teams of thousands of people implementing the most advanced security technology that's available, they have much more secure systems than your IT department of 6 can put together, I'm sure. So you can let your IT group know that these systems are likely more secure even than what they have. So what I'll do after this presentation is I'll send you a copy of this list so you can take a closer look and you can see some of the software platforms that are available for commissioning. So one thing to note is these software systems are certainly a big piece of the equation to finish projects, They're just not the biggest piece. Completing projects during commissioning is not fundamentally about software. Software is a tool to facilitate your project completions. Commissioning is complex. We know that, right? So naturally, the software systems are complex too. And the processes and the workflows that we have just reviewed a few minutes ago that you implement within the software to complete your commissioning, that is what will determine if your commissioning is successful and you're successful with these software systems. So be sure you're using these software systems correctly if you want to get the most value from them. Okay, so these are the two most common mistakes on projects: leaving commissioning to the end of projects and still using paper and spreadsheets on projects. And these are the two main reasons why projects are struggling with commissioning. And if you fix just these two things with the systems and processes we've discussed, you'll make huge improvements on your projects to prevent costly delays during commissioning. We've talked about a lot of good information today. We've talked about the commissioning processes that are required for projects to be successful, and we've talked about the software systems that are used to manage your commissioning processes. When all these processes are managed within your software systems, they all form a piece of the commissioning puzzle. And all pieces of the puzzle are required if you want to complete commissioning as efficiently as possible. And commissioning is a complex puzzle to solve. I think we could agree on that, right? Which is why we offer support to get the systems and processes you need to standardize your commissioning. Because when one or more of these puzzle pieces is missing, when you're not implementing industry best processes for commissioning, or if you're not using software systems to manage your commissioning will always be a brute force struggle at the end of your projects to complete. You'll never really know when construction is finished, and incomplete construction will continue to result in costly delays during commissioning. Design issues will impact your progress, and your cowboy commissioning will always be a scramble at the end. Standardized systems and processes are required for commissioning to make sure you've got all pieces of the commissioning puzzle in place to avoid costly mistakes at the end of your project. Imagine what a system like this would look like. A system that tells you exactly what is complete for construction. I mean, like everything. If every nut and bolt is installed and has been witness striped, if every glanded cable is terminated correctly, all mega results are within tolerance, all pipes have been flushed and meet pressure and leak test requirements. Imagine if you knew exactly what was complete and exactly what was still outstanding for construction. Wouldn't that be helpful? To know if, in fact, systems are actually ready to proceed with commissioning down to every little detail that's required, rather than just taking someone's word for it that they say it's done, because everybody's definition of done means something different on projects, it always seems, doesn't it? Wouldn't that be easier to know what's complete rather than being just thrown out into the field to discover all the hidden Easter eggs on your own? I know it will. I know it is from experience. And that's what having standardized systems and processes for commissioning allows you to do. There's no more trial and error in the field, and there's no more searching for the next snag that's going to hold you up. Imagine how much easier it would be to complete commissioning if you had a system like this. Now, without a system like this, and that's a lot of people's current situation from the chat, could you tell me exactly where your project is at in just a few seconds? Could you do that? If you don't know your project completion status, then that's a problem, because if you don't know what's left, and I mean like every little detail, then neither does anyone else on your project. And if nobody, or if only a few of the commissioning experts know what's left to finish your project, then how could it ever be possible to work as a team to finish the job when not everybody knows what needs to be done? Now, if having standardized systems and processes to complete projects more efficiently still isn't enough of a reason, there's two more reasons I'll give you on why these systems are needed on projects. I'm sure you're well aware of the huge volume of project work that's upcoming and the lack of skilled resources to work on projects. Well, you're not going to attract the labor you need if you're still using outdated processes. The younger generation, they're looking for better ways to do their job, right? And the technology to support them to do their best work. They're not going to tolerate old, outdated spreadsheets anymore. They're going to go down the street because there's lots of project work and they're going to choose from the many other projects to work on that are implementing better systems to make their jobs easier. So if you want to compete for the limited resources that are available on projects, then you're going to have to adapt, because the huge volume of projects that are in the queue for all of the electrification projects that we hear about, all the EV battery supply chains that need to be built out, all the climate change initiatives that are upon us. There's just a huge volume of work. And all these projects, they're going to make the competition for skilled project resources even more fierce than it already is. And it's already impossible to find good people that understand commissioning and have the experience to work on these projects. So just for labor reasons, spreadsheets aren't going to cut it anymore. And also, you don't want to put yourself in a bad situation during claims and disputes. And despite everyone's best efforts, there will always be things that go wrong on projects. If you don't have standardized systems and processes for commissioning that result in things getting missed or testing that's going undocumented, then you're not in a very good spot when things go wrong. If you're missing commissioning records or have missteps in the commissioning process, then you could be liable for claims. And when you can't find the information you need in spreadsheets, this could end up costing you a lot of money in the end. So don't overlook these two reasons as well, why you need to get standardized commissioning systems and processes implemented on your projects right away. Tahir is asking, what are the inputs for software? So it is a good question, right? Everybody, when I first started looking at this stuff, you think software, okay, Excel or Word, you got a row of buttons at the top there, right? And you're going to be able to press these buttons and they're going to magically manage your commissioning on your project. But it doesn't really work that way. Commissioning software is a little bit different, and the inputs to the software are critically important. Essentially, what you're going to do is load your project data and program them to be a model of your commissioning process. So the inputs are, there is a bit of front end work required there, and that's why we help people figure this out, is to get all your tag list, your systematization, your workflows, your checklist all loaded into the software so that the software models exactly how you want to do your commissioning. So it is a bit of a process, but we do simplify it to make it easy for people to get the software up and running, so it's not quite so daunting. And from everything I've described here, I'm sure you can see the value in implementing systems and processes to standardize your commissioning as the volume of workload picks up, as we need to get more people working on projects, as we need to make sure that we can complete projects as efficiently as possible. So then the question is, how are you going to get this done? What's the first thing you're going to do on Monday to start working on this? In your case, Tahir, what's your first step you're going to take to start getting these inputs ready to load into the software to get the systems and processes you need to standardize your commissioning? If you're serious about commissioning, then you've got a choice to make. You can do this yourself. You can try to implement commissioning systems and processes on your own, with trial and error on a few projects, and you can see what works and you can see what doesn't work, and probably have some costly mistakes along the way. And this is a totally legitimate way to go, because this is what I've done over the last 10 years to get this stuff all figured out, working on several projects and implementing software and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't. And you can do the same over the next 10 years as well to figure this stuff out on your own. You can select software on your own and you can try to get it all set up, and you can attend a few software demos, which never really get you to the nuts and bolts of what you need to see in software anyways. You can try to cut through all the sales jargon, and maybe you end up with the right software, but maybe you don't when you realize 12 months later that the software you chose can't really do what you were told that it could, right? You can roll out a new system to your project team on your own, and you can develop your own training material to onboard all the people on your projects, and maybe your team adopts the new software, or maybe they hate it and they insist on going back to their paper and spreadsheets that they've used for so long that they are so comfortable with, right? And despite your best efforts, maybe you still get stuck with the way it's always been done. I understand it's hard to make change. The construction industry is stuck in its ways, right? And hasn't changed for decades. And there's a lot of corporate red tape to cut through that can make it difficult to improve the way that we do our works. There's there's lots of things that can get in your way if you want to try to make this positive change on your own. Or you can get our support to roll out new systems and processes for your project so you can standardize your commissioning with top-rated commissioning software and industry-best commissioning processes so you can complete commissioning as efficiently as possible and prevent costly delays at the end of your projects. You can get new systems and processes set up fast so that you can start using them right away. And you can have confidence you're getting the best systems and processes that you need with a custom solution that meets your specific project situation and meets your exact project needs. You get systems and processes to standardize your commissioning fast because this doesn't need to take months. You can start using a new system in only a few weeks. Getting systems and standards to standardize your commissioning doesn't have to feel so daunting when you get support from someone who does this all the time and has helped several other people and projects get the systems and processes that they need for commissioning. So the next step is for you to see what this actually looks like on your projects, right? To see how the specific systems and processes could apply to your projects. What does the software look like? How does it work? How are digital workflows managed? And how are checklists and punch items tracked and managed in your software? How are your subsystem and system completions identified and tracked? How does your work transition through these gated commissioning workflows that are modeled in software? Basically, how does all this that we've talked about get applied to your specific project situation? So if you want to see how this all works on your specific projects and see what this would look like in your specific situation to get systems and processes on your projects, then please book a free consultation and we'll review your specific project. And we can suggest the systems and processes that are right for your specific project, including the software to use, the digital workflows to follow, the checklist templates that are required to be built into the software, and how to best standardize your commissioning so you can complete commissioning as efficiently as possible and avoid costly mistakes. You can book a free consultation at commissioningandStartup.com/system. At this link, you'll be able to answer a few questions to tell us about your projects. Then on the next page, you can select a time to meet for your free consultation. During your free consultation, you get to see what standardized commissioning systems and processes would look like on your projects with top-rated commissioning software and industry best processes using electronic forms and digital workflows. When you meet, we can give you a complete picture of how standardized systems and processes for commissioning can be applied to your specific projects. So you can see how this can help your projects be completed more efficiently during commissioning. We make getting standardized commissioning systems and processes much easier for you rather than trying to figure this out on your own. So go to commissioningandStartup.com/system and book your free consultation right now. Answer a few questions about your projects, select a time to meet for your free consultation. And when we meet, I'll show you the systems and processes that are best suited to standardize commissioning on your projects so you can complete commissioning much more efficiently. This is perfect for companies that need to standardize their commissioning with better systems and processes. Maybe you're still stuck with paper and spreadsheets, or you've heard about software and you've thought about it for a while that you need to upgrade your process and systems, but you just haven't been able to get it done. And I understand because it's a tough transition to make. Maybe you've thought about this for a while and people are just busy on projects, right? There's no time to go look at a different, better way. It's just too easy to default with the way it's always been done. And it just doesn't happen, right? Well, now there's an easier way to make it happen with our support to make this transition. Or maybe you have a new project that's coming up or a new department that's being set up and you want to get started in the right direction. Our services make it super simple for you to get the systems and processes you need and get set up with standardized commissioning methods right from the start, right at the beginning of your project. So if you need help building out systems and processes for commissioning and you want to get it done fast, then this is a good option for you. We also have a perfect option for individuals. If you would prefer to learn how to do this on your own, learn the systems and processes that are required for commissioning, we do have a self-study option as well. And I'll send you the link to our Commissioning Academy training program after this presentation. If you think that might be a better fit, you can check that out and submit your application if you'd like to go down that route to learn this stuff on your own. We've got a good option for you there. It could also be that you're not the decision maker on projects, and that's often the case. That's okay. Projects are made of large teams and lots of people and many decision makers. And this might all sound like a good idea to get standardized systems and processes for your commissioning. But of course, you're going to need to talk to others, right? To get them on board and discuss what this looks like and how to implement this on your projects. That's often the case. I understand completely that you need to talk with your project manager or talk to your engineering team or whoever, all very normal. So there's two things that you can do. We can meet first for your free consultation, and I can answer any questions that you have. That way you have all the information that you need to go discuss with your manager or your supervisor or whoever else you need to talk to on your project team. If we meet first, that's a good way to prepare for the internal discussions that you'll need to have. Or if you prefer, you can invite others to the free consultation as well. So you can tell me about your project, you can schedule a meeting, and I can show you and others on the same call what this would look like, what standardized systems and processes would look like on your project. So whichever you prefer, we can meet first before you discuss, or if you want to bring others to the first discussion here so that everyone can see at the same time what this could look like, then both options are available to you. So either way, go to commissioningandstartup.com/system right away and book your free consultation to see how this would look on your projects. So what I've noticed is you can literally change the entire trajectory of your projects when you implement the right systems and processes for commissioning, because you're able to standardize your commissioning and complete commissioning much more efficiently as possible, so that you can avoid costly mistakes at the end of your project. So if you're working on one project, this is a great fit to make sure that the end of your project goes well. A lot of groups have multiple projects where they'll finish one and go to the next, go to the next, go to the next. Standardizing your commissioning processes is super valuable in those situations because people are moving from one project to the next. And when you've got standardized systems and processes, it just makes so much more sense when they can go to the next project and everything looks the same, to be able to work on the same things. So we can help you get this in place. And there's a reason that people come to us for commissioning systems and processes, because we've seen what works and what doesn't. And we have certainty in what we're doing. And people want proven systems that actually work, that produce results on projects. So if you're serious about completing capital projects during commissioning, go to commissioningandstartup.com/system, book your free consultation to see what this looks like on your projects. We'll get you the systems and processes you need to succeed with capital project commissioning. All right. So we've finished exactly right on time. That's the end of the presentation of the content that I have to present to you. I do have some additional time if anybody has any questions that they want to shoot into the software. There's already been some good questions, and I can answer a few more if there's any additional questions. While you do that, if you want to enter your questions into the chat, there are typically a few common questions that I do get at this point in the presentation. So I'll just go through those and I'll watch for your questions in the chat and answer anything that you've got there. So people often ask me at this point is, well, why do I need commissioning software? They've been using spreadsheets and they've been working just fine for several years, right? Well, without a system or without standardized processes, then if you're just using spreadsheets, what you're doing is you're relying 100% on people to get the job done. And that can work if you've got really good people, but that will only get you so far, right? Because the good commissioning people are getting harder and harder to find. And when your good people retire or if they move on to other projects, then you've really got nothing except for your outdated spreadsheets. If you want to transfer the knowledge of our wise commissioning experts that we've been working with many years that are going to retire at some point, then you need to implement systems and processes that capture this knowledge in how you do your work. If you want to grow and expand and take on more projects in the future, then you can't rely entirely on your people. You need systems and processes to back them up. It's the only way to survive on projects with the challenges that we're faced with in the industry. So another common question I get is, well, why do I need processes to manage commissioning? Why don't I just go get my PMP and get certified, and that'll tell me how to manage my commissioning as well? If you go look at any of PMI's information, it's pretty light on details to finish capital projects. PMI covers on how to start a project, and they briefly cover some aspects on quality management, but there is nothing on the processes or systems required for commissioning project management. The stuff we help people with just isn't included in PMP. And I think this is why there's so much confusion in the industry, is because finishing capital projects during commissioning isn't taught to project managers. Systems and processes for commissioning are really the missing part of what's required to actually finish capital projects. And it's an important part. Finishing projects is definitely an important part of projects. So if you're planning to get your PMP, that's still a good thing, and you should certainly do that, but you'll still be missing the systems and processes to finish capital projects. And that's what we help you with here. People sometimes ask me, well, do these systems and processes apply to all industries? So I want to highlight the distinction again between technical commissioning and commissioning project management. All projects, of course, do technical commissioning differently, right? Every project has unique technical requirements in the breakers to close and the valves to open. These are always project specific. The technical commissioning aspects are always different, and no two projects are the same, right? Even two projects within the same industry are going to have different technical commissioning requirements. However, the processes and the software for commissioning project management, this applies to all industries, regardless of the technical details. The same risk mitigating steps that we've discussed today need to be taken on all capital projects in all industries. It's always the same risk-based approach to manage commissioning so that your project-specific technical commissioning goes well at the end. So the commissioning project management principles that we use, they do apply to all complex projects. If you're building mechanical systems, electrical systems, process systems, all energy systems, all complex projects involving mechanical, electrical, and automation equipment that needs to work together as one system at the end of your projects. So to answer the question, yes, these commissioning systems and processes apply to all industries. I see a question. I've been trying to locate 3-day mini course. Okay, it's right on our homepage. If you go to commissioningandstartup.com, there's a button right at the top that says mini course. You can go there and sign up for that. That'll get you hooked up into there. So that's a good introduction to the commissioning process. We've also got resources for commissioning software, and of course, our full integrated completions program that gives you the whole story and all the details of how this all comes together. So mini course is a good place to start with, and you'll be hooked up with some other items there as well. Eric, my commissioning colleagues are not in the USA. They are located in Australia and would need to schedule a time that would also, yep. Absolutely. Yeah. We do have lots of people interested in commissioning in Australia. So when you submit your information there will be times that align with Australia time that I guess are a bit later in the day here in Canada, US, then that works for Australia. So we do have times that are 5 p.m., 6 p.m. Central. But if you look there and there isn't a time that works, then just shoot me an email. We'll find a time that works for you for sure. Being that there's multiple groups working on projects in multiple continents, then software is exactly what you need, because that just brings everybody together when there's multiple sites to get the same picture of information. So we'll help you out. Definitely book a time. We'll have a chat. Who was responsible to prepare the systematization drawing, engineering or commissioning team? Your engineering team might tell you that they can do it, but they are a little misguided in their approach. The commissioning team is responsible for startup. and your startup is what will determine systematization. Your commissioning team can only define how they want to start up the systems, and the commissioning team is the only group that can determine systematization. So your engineering team can certainly take a crack at it, but they won't get it right because they're not the group responsible for starting up this system. It can only be done by the commissioning group. Projects run into a lot of problems when engineering groups are determining startup sequences or when construction groups are determining startup sequences. We see that all the time, but you can only plan projects from right to left by working from your project in service date, determining your startup sequence, determining your commissioning sequence, which then drives your construction sequence and your design sequence. That's the only way you're going to meet the end of your project is you plan right from left. So if your engineering group is planning, then of course, they're one of the earlier groups in projects. They're going to default to planning from left to right. They're not going to quite get it. It's going to miss a line. So definitely commissioning team has to systematize projects. So one more question I typically get is people sometimes ask, well, can they do this later? This all sounds good, but you're busy with projects and you don't have time, or it might seem like it's too early in your project. And I totally get it. Project's life is very busy. I've lived that. So you're getting 100 emails a day and you're busy right now. But that's why we're here is we know that you're busy and we want to make this as easy as possible for you so you can stay focused on your project. So don't leave this too late. I encourage you, please, that it's never too early to get this stuff set up on your project. If your project has already started, then it's already time to get these systems and processes in place on your projects. Don't miss your chance when the damage is already done on your projects and there's nothing you can do later to fix it if you're leaving this too late. You need to get some urgent items in place for commissioning now if you want your technical commissioning to go well later. So go to commissioningandstartup.com/system and book your free consultation call. I'll show you what you need to get set up right away before the damage is done and before you're stuck in commissioning firefighting mode. So awesome. Good questions in the chat. I'm not seeing any more questions. If there is a last minute one that you want to shoot in there, by all means, do that. But if there's no more, then let's end the discussion here for today. So go to commissioningandstartup.com/system and book your free consultation call to see what standardized systems and processes for commissioning could look on your projects. Do you guys use Teams as well? Yeah, we can use Teams. I think when you book a meeting invite, it'll send you a Zoom link. If you prefer Teams as well, send a Zoom link at the or a Teams link at the same time. I know a lot of people are more familiar with Teams, and we can use Teams, Google Meet, Zoom, whatever you prefer to have a chat. So if you don't like the meeting link invite that's automatically sent, just send a new one at the same time there. I'll be sure to join that one, whatever you're comfortable with. How do you estimate the manpower for commissioning? That's a good point. Yep. So that'll come a bit later once we've gone through some of our planning elements and we see what the actual commissioning and startup sequence is going to look like. If it's required to be quite compressed and say in a hydroelectric generating station, if we have to be commissioning 2 turbine and generating systems at the same time, then we'll have that visibility to know what kind of manpower is required to do that. Typically, that's not always the case, that we're going to plan our sequence sequentially and do 1 turbine and generator and then go to the next. So then that would determine what kind of manpower we need for that. You get the right software system and it can actually do a lot of that for you to know that this particular checklist takes 10 minutes to complete. You've got 1,000 of them to do in the next 2-week time frame. It'll tell you exactly how many people you need to do that. And it'll tell you exactly how many people you need to do that months in advance. So if you know you've got a month of crunch time where you've got a lot of loop checks to complete, it'll tell you how much manpower you need to do that based on what's modeled in the software. A lot of projects get that wrong and don't have the time component or don't have the manpower built in there. So they're just guessing, right? They've got 10 people that are going to be doing loop checks, but really they need 30. And so when you use software correctly, it's going to tell you ahead of time where those kind of stumbling blocks are that you're not going to have enough manpower to get this done. and you better start planning a few months in advance to get a few more guys because you're going to need some checks, even if it's just short term. If you've got a 2 month crunch term, then time to get that done. The software will tell you that to make sure you got the guys to do the checks. Okay, so do go to commissioningandstartup.com/system. Watch your email over the next few days because I will send you all the links that we've discussed today, including I'll send you a link to this replay. So if you want to share it with others, by all means, do that. If you want to watch it again, you can certainly do that, but share it with other people that need to understand how this stuff works on projects. It's super helpful when more people know how this works at the end of projects. I will send you a link to the software list that we discussed on the screen. So you can review the list in more detail. You can see some of the software platforms that are available for your projects. I'll send you the link, the commissioning process flowchart that we went through, so you can go through that in a bit more detail and see what each stage of the commissioning process looks like, and make sure that you're not missing anything on your projects in the workflows that you've got assigned for commissioning. And I will send you the link to book your free consultation call so you can find a time that works with Australia time zones or whatever. All the times will be listed there. Just tell me a little bit about your project and book your free consultation, and I'll show you what these systems and controls and processes could look like to standardize commissioning on your projects, and you can see what that all looks like in detail to answer any additional questions that you have. So lots of great questions in the chat. I do appreciate everyone being here and your engagement and your interest in trying to figure this out on projects, because projects are really struggling with commissioning at the end. And the fact that you're here means that you want to improve that and help projects be more successful. And we need more people like you. So thank you for joining. Please stay safe on your projects, and I hope to see you soon.